And I've definitely drawn on theories like that in my characters because I feel like it's really important to try and make characters, I don't know, as realistic and flawed as possible because we are all flawed. Like, no one is perfect. And I think probably I've drawn most from like writers like Robin Hobb and Joe Abercrombie who write these characters who are really um, sometimes not very nice people.
So thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. And so tell us about your book, Awakening the Commune's Curse, book one.
Mhm. Yeah, so Awakening is the first in a trilogy, the trilogy being The Commune's Curse. It's a multi-perspective book, so told from four POVs, but they're not balanced in that you see a lot more of certain characters than others. So we've got Evelyn, Rafe, Hector, and Commander Suleiman. Um, and basically, it's a dark fantasy. It's set in a kingdom that is essentially ruled by what is an authoritarian cult-like organization, and they're hunting down children who have been born with these ancient powers. So they kind of present in essentially random children across the kingdom, and the commune wants to control these powers. Um, so Evelyn is what I would call the main character of this book. She's 18 years old. She has been through a traumatic experience in her past, and she's kind of struggling with anxiety, low self-esteem, trauma, and really struggles to trust people. But she finds herself kind of thrust into the role of protector of Rafe, who is one of the other point of view characters, and his sister Rose, who is 6 years old. But it turns out, and you find this out early on, so I'm not going to count this as a spoiler because I've also been using it as my like advertising. But basically, Rose has these powers that the commune are hunting down. So essentially, the story kind of starts off where Evelyn is responsible for these two children, essentially, um, and struggling to know how to keep them safe from what is a really powerful organization, in terms of, a lot of people don't question the authority that they hold over the kingdom, even though it's quite problematic in a lot of respects. Um, and yeah, that's the story. Is how is Evelyn going to protect Rafe and Rose? Hector ends up being someone who is part of a rebel group who is trying to fight against the commune. So he tries to offer them safety. And Commander Suleiman is a soldier who works for the commune. So he's one of the people who's hunting them down. So yeah, that's kind of it in a waffly nutshell. I won't try and explain it any more than that because we could be here for a long time. But it's you know what the hardest part about writing a book is being able to succinctly explain it. That's what I've found having written the book. Hopefully that was succinct enough for you.
Yeah. So it's a trilogy, correct?
That's right.
And do you have the whole trilogy planned out?
I do. So book two is written but in need of substantial editing. And book three is kind of, I've got a few chapters written. I kind of get random scenes that I want to write down and try and get them written before they kind of leave my brain altogether. But when I signed with my publisher, Santa Fe Writers Project, they asked for like a full outline of the three books just to show that I actually knew where I was going with it. Because I tend to be someone who doesn't plan extensively. I like to just get into the writing and see where it goes. So that was a bit of a challenge, actually having to sit down and write the three-book synopsis. So that's essentially what I have for book three is a detailed synopsis. So I know roughly where it's going to go. I think there'll probably be some changes along the way because there have been changes in the first book as I've done the editing. But yeah, I have a kind of an overarching plan, but I think when I come to write book three, there might be some surprises even for me.
Yeah. Nice. So the outline that you gave to the publisher, if you decide to change anything from that original outline, how do you have to let them know about it, or is it just something that you have the freedom to go and change if you want to?
Yeah, I think it's probably a case of they just wanted to know that I roughly knew where I was going. I wasn't just saying this is a trilogy, but I'm just like fumbling around in the dark, not knowing that it's actually going to work out to be a trilogy. Um, to be honest, I think the main plot points will be very similar, if not the same. And they've been very, very kind of supportive in terms of allowing me like creative freedom. Like my editor Nicole is amazing at just being able to um, encourage my thought process as a writer and like to give me ideas if I feel stuck anywhere. So I have no doubt that that will happen as we go through book
Mhm.
2 and then once I've written book 3. So yeah, I don't feel like it's a rigid thing I have to stick to. To be honest, I haven't read it in like 2 years, so I should probably go back and remind myself what I wrote. Um, yeah, I think it'll be one of those processes that will be quite open to change if I need to change anything.
Hmm. And how long have you been planning to write a book?
Um, you know what? Like this is the first book that I've written in full. Um, and I started writing it 2018. Um, I was training to be a counselor and I was a student with probably, well, actually definitely way more spare time than I have now. And I was like, I hadn't written in a long time. I used to write when I was a kid, and then I don't know if a lot of writers sympathize with the fact that you get this, I don't know, this idea in your head. You're like, oh, I'm not very good at writing, so I'm just not going to bother, kind of thing. That was definitely my thought process for a long time. Um, but when I started training to be a counsellor, I thought, you know what, I'm gonna just do it. I've got spare time. I can commit to trying to write a book. And I finished it. I think I started like March 2018 and finished in NaNoWriMo that year.
Hmm.
That was an intense month. And yeah, so it's not something that I had planned for a long time. I think at the back of my head, I always thought I'd like to go back to writing, but that was the first time I said to myself, right, I'm gonna actually write a whole book, and I did it, and I saw it through, which is yeah, I'm proud that I was able to do that.
Hmm. And you mentioned being a counselor. How did your time as a counselor affect your or influence your storytelling?
It definitely has a lot of influence. I mean, so I mainly, through the pandemic in particular, worked with like teenagers and younger children. Um, so I've got two teenage characters in the book, Evelyn and Rafe. And it's not that I kind of drew on any particular specific person's experience. I've just seen probably common experience across teenagers and children, um, especially over the pandemic when there was like rising mental health issues that I was very much witnessing like firsthand. So I've definitely drawn from that experience of working with that age group, um, and also learning about counselling theory and mental health theory. I find fascinating. Um, I'll talk about it like to anyone who'll listen, to be honest, and I tend to use it as like a bit of a foundation for character creation in particular. There's certain theories like attachment theory, for example, that explores how your childhood attachments to certain people, whether it be parents or other caregivers, um, impacts on how you kind of grow up, how you think, feel, and behave as an adult. Um, and I've definitely drawn on theories like that in my characters because I feel like it's really important to try and make characters, I don't know, as realistic and flawed as possible because we are all flawed. Like, no one is perfect. And I think probably I've drawn most from like writers like Robin Hobb and Joe Abercrombie, who write these characters who are really um, sometimes not very nice people, but you still sympathize with them because you can see where they're coming from. And I think the counselling theory and the fact that I've worked with so many people since I've trained to be a counsellor and just heard about so many different experiences and used my own experiences as well, um, that has definitely allowed me to create what I hope are characters who people can connect with because they can actually see like, oh yeah, I'm like that myself, or I know someone like that. I think that's where it's the counselling has really come into it with the characters.
Hmm. How has your time as a counselor changed you as a person in just everyday
Uh,
life?
Massively. Well, before as a counsellor, I feel like I had a lot of unexplored aspects of myself and of like just society as a whole. And I'll try and explain that in terms of like we did modules looking at like different cultures and stuff like that. And training to be a counsellor was the first time I ever heard the term white privilege, and I was just like, wow, okay, this is scary. This is something that I totally agree does exist, but I had never even thought about it before. So it really opened my eyes to a lot of issues like that, and also to a lot of issues in myself that I had never really looked at before. Like I said earlier with the childhood stuff, I think that really does play a role for a lot of people in terms of how you do turn out and how you function as a person. So part of the degree that I did required you to have your own personal therapy while you were training to be a counsellor, because you can't really counsel other people if you've not looked at your own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I changed a lot as a person. I learned a lot. I much to my husband's joy, changed my political leanings because it was something I'd never ever thought about too much. I was just like, I'm going to vote for who my family votes for. I'm not really think about it. And then I was like, wait a minute. Like my empathy grew for other people. I was hearing about other people's experiences and just think, I can't, there's no way I can still vote for that particular side, knowing what I know now and having met the people I've met. So, and I'd hopefully I'm just a better person for it generally. There's still, I don't kid myself that I've done all the work that I need to. But I've come a long way from the person I was. I've changed relationships. I've met new people who are far better for me, far more balanced relationships. It's just, yeah, it's been a really amazing journey, and part of that has led me to actually having this book coming out, which is all part and parcel of it. I wouldn't have done this if I hadn't trained to be a counsellor.
Oh wow, that's pretty massive changes.
Mm.
And when you create characters, do you create their entire backstory before you put them in the book? Do you know who they are before you insert them in the story?
I think to an extent, like part of me must, even if it's on a subconscious level, because so to kind of step back a bit, I started writing this book as well. I started playing Dungeons and Dragons for the first time while I was on my counselling course because someone invited me, and Evelyn was my Dungeons and Dragons character. So I had to write her backstory. And so I kind of had her pre-written, and I knew what some of her history was. But it's definitely one of those things that has become like so much more padded out as I wrote the book and as I don't want to say learned more about her, but I think it is that. I don't believe characters have agency. Like they're all part of me. They're all coming out of my brain. But as I wrote more about her, like more of her made sense. And it's the same for all the other characters, especially the main point of view characters. I don't tend to plan massively. I do get bored with it. So I was just like, I'm going to write and see what happens. And a lot of them did change in terms of they became way more padded out, definitely as I was writing the book and as I was editing it as well, because having other people look at it, like I've had beta readers and my editor just looking at it from a different perspective. Sometimes you can become a little bit blinded to like plot holes or like some things about characters that didn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
So I would say, to actually answer your question, the characters were kind of written to start with, but they've changed massively over the course of like the 3 years it took to go from first draft to final draft.
Mm-hmm. And it's always interesting to me to hear everyone's publishing experience because everyone has a different experience, and just something that I find really fascinating. How everyone they work so hard on a book, and and then it's almost like the real work starts
Mm,
after that point to get it published. What was your publishing journey like?
hmm Totally agree with that. Yeah, if only I'd known like writing the book was the easy part. Um, It was, I mean, when I finished the first draft in November 2018, I was like, yeah, I've written a book. This is it. I've done it. And I immediately started submitting it out, which was really foolish because it was the first draft. It was not in any way, shape, or form ready to be read by anyone but myself. So yeah, that was kind of a learning curve, most definitely, because I submitted it to a lot of agents, got a lot of rejections, understandably so. And at the same time, I met a friend called Cindy Van Wilder, who is another fantasy author. I met them on Twitter, and they were giving me a lot of feedback on my book and helping me to basically do rewrites and stuff like that. Because that was definitely what was needed. I needed to at least read the whole thing again, because even just taking a little break from something and going back to it, you notice plot holes, you notice issues that you didn't notice before. So probably did like a 6-month window of submitting in that first draft before I realized, yeah, I probably should be taking this like back and working on it again. So I did a lot of tweaks. I had some more beta readers that I met on Twitter, and started submitting again. I think I want to say like summer 2019. And I was doing again agents, but also I found publishers who were willing to take submissions from unagented authors. Part of that is probably because I'm really impatient, and I was like, if I get an agent, then there's still like going to be a wait before there's a publisher. Whereas if I go direct to the publisher, there's less of a wait. Yeah, so I still did get rejections, but I continued kind of working on it as I was going. I was making like little tweaks here and there. And I found my publisher, SFWP, because they put out like an open call for fantasy like genre books. And I was like, yeah, you know what? I'm going to give it a go. I'm going to submit it and see what they say. And actually the feedback was like, no, but if you make these tweaks and like you could work on this area, we'd like to see it again. And that was the first like actual kind of feedback, or it was a rejection, but it was positive because they were open to actually reading it again. So I took that away. I was like really eagerly like, I need to do this right now. So I kind of sped through making changes, resubmitted it like end of 2019. Obviously 2020 hit and the world shut down. I think I got an offer like spring 2020. Yeah, so it was a bit of a waiting period, but to be honest, that's part of the process of submitting anyway. Wherever you're submitting to, there's going to be a wait. Yeah, and they offered a contract, and that was it. I was really excited, and here we are 2 years later, and it's coming out. It's I feel like I'm quite lucky in a way that it's my first book that was accepted. I know that doesn't happen for people all the time. And yeah, sometimes I think I need to kind of actually realize that this is really amazing because I'm lucky to have found SFWP and that they took my book on, and it's not been that long a journey, to be honest. You hear about people who are submitting for years and years, and actually it was like a 1 year to 18-month process, and I found a publisher, and here we are. And it still feels really weird that I have a copy of my book like on my shelf. I still have to pinch myself.
Yeah, it must be great to finally hold it in your hands and have your book in your hands. It's a huge achievement. It's a huge accomplishment. So it's great, and especially for a first time author, for your first book to get an offer, that's another big accomplishment.
Absolutely.
As far as storytelling goes, what makes a good story?
Ooh, that is a question. For me, I think it's the characters come like number one. Just again thinking of the authors that I like. I already mentioned Robin Hobb and Joe Abercrombie. They write amazing characters. Obviously, he's massively popular, and that there are so many amazing smaller authors, but George R. R. Martin springs to mind because of the complexity of the characters that he writes. I think, yes, obviously the plot does play a role in how enjoyable a book is, but if a book has really like bland or kind of tropey feeling characters, I'll really struggle to get through it, and probably just stop reading it at some point, because it's just, I think it's the characters you get invested in and the characters that you care about, and you care about whether they're going to actually succeed in whatever it is they're doing. And if you don't care about them, then what is the point in reading about their journey? Um, yeah, and I think that's, I'm someone who I've enjoyed fancy stories in like every medium, book, TV, film, video game. Um, and whenever I think about the ones that I enjoy the most, it is where the character is, they're not always the good person, but they are one who I can connect with on some level. And that's what makes me really enjoy the story.
Hmm. And as far as and you've written a lot of short stories too, and I
Mm,
wondered, how do you write an effective short story? How has that experience writing short stories
mm.
helped you with your book?
Yeah, well, short stories are. I think I was just writing them because it was like that idea that I could write something really quickly, and I was submitting them out. Eventually, I ended up just putting them all on my blog because, again, with the impatience, I was like, I can't be bothered to wait like 3 months, 3 to 6 months to hear back from somewhere whether they want to print it or not. I'm just going to put them all on my blog, and then people can read them immediately.
Mhm.
Um, so I think it's that kind of instant gratification of, you can write a short story in like a few hours, whereas a book obviously takes way longer than that. And I don't know whether my short stories are any good, to be honest, because I just put them on my blog. I'm like, here you go, enjoy. But for me, I think it is just like being able to explore different stories or different characters that aren't set in this trilogy, because I'm so like focused on that. Being able to step away from it and do something a little bit different every now and then helps to keep me, well, it's not that I would get bored of it, but it's just interesting to step into other characters' heads from time to time and different worlds. Um, and my trilogy is a bit grim. It's a bit dark fantasy. So, although to be fair, most of my short stories are also a bit grim, sometimes I write happy ones. um, like, so that's something different to explore as well. Actually, something that's got a happy ending rather than something a little bit sad or depressing. Um, yeah, so I think they just give a different way for a writer to like hone their craft. I think there is an art to short story writing, and I don't know if I've actually got it, because there's people who write way better short stories than me. But I just enjoy writing them because, like I say, it's a little bit of a change from the trilogy.
Hmm. Yeah, it's probably nice, like you said, get a break from that world.
Mm,
I also read that you're a fan of horror and of thrillers, and I wondered,
mm,
how did you take aspects of those genres and put them in this
mm.
book?
Um, I think probably a little bit of the horror. Like, sometimes I try and recreate a bit of an atmosphere in certain aspects of the book. Like, there's some locations, because I think the horror genre is one where location is really important to get that balance of atmosphere right, and being able to get that tension and um, strike that kind of sense of foreboding in the reader. I think of a couple of times in Awakening where that happens, where it's a little bit like, oh, what's going to happen? Like, this feels a bit like scary. Um, so I would say probably I've drawn from that. And yeah, I think that's probably the main thing. I've got another like fantasy like story that I'm working on that is horror, because it's got a serial killer in it, and I think that I'm trying to like focus my horror knowledge, however limited they might be, into that series, although I haven't looked at it for a little while. Whereas Awakening, it's, I'd say, probably more dark fantasy than horror, but there are certainly elements that I've taken from the horror books that I've read. Um, I don't want to say Stephen King is the main one, but he's the only horror author I can think of right now whose writing I really admire. Yeah, so I think it's probably something you may see in future books from me, because those are definitely genres that I want to write more of. I may like to try a crime thriller at some point, or
Mm.
just bring in elements of those genres into fantasy, because fantasy will always be like my number one. But I think it's interesting when you have those mashups. They can make really kind of unique storytelling. So I'd
Yeah,
like to give that a try at some point.
definitely. And I
Mm.
was thinking, as far as genres go, is a genre important? Something you've probably learned from your publishing experiences. Do publishers look for a genre, like who, like in other words, who
Mm.
can we market this book to? Is that important? Was that a thought that went through your mind as you were writing Awakening, that you had to have, like you just said, you described the book. Did you have to have a genre that you pitched it as, or is that important at all?
Hmm. Um, I think it was important when looking for agents,
Hmm.
um, and that's something I'll bear in mind if I do ever look for an agent in future, because they've obviously got their manuscript wish list, and they want specific genres and clearly set out. I want to see this. I don't want to see this. SFWP, I think, probably a bit unique in that they will literally take any genre, um, and they're more like want to see the story. They don't really care what it fits into. Um, so when I pitched it, I submitted it to that fantasy open call for them, but it was more of a case of they wanted to just see improvements in the story, and not necessarily that it fitted like really neatly into the fantasy genre.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think to be honest, it probably counts more for like readers, where you're defining genre and where that's coming in, because people are going to be searching for certain genres in what they're reading.
Mhm.
So perhaps that's where it's coming in. The importance of those things is in the marketing of books, rather than in for us as authors, um, being able to sell it on the kind of back end, if that makes sense. I think it does come down to like a marketing like it's easier for publishers to market something if they know, okay, it fits into like YA fantasy or whatever. Um, Even if there are like blurred lines in the genre, some books do get kind of pigeonholed sometimes, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really interesting. That the whole process is really interesting to me, the
Mm.
whole publishing process. Did you consider, because you mentioned being impatient when when you first started, did you consider self-publishing and just getting it and printing it and getting it out there?
Mhm. Absolutely. That was like the end goal. If I didn't find a agent or publisher, um, I was trying to like sow the seeds with my husband. I was like, yeah, if I don't find anyone, they'll probably just, self-publish, just to try and make him aware that that could happen, and like there might be costs involved and all that kind of stuff. Because I think there's self-publishing now is way easier than it has been previously, and there are some amazing self-published books available. So this was a story that I didn't really ever want to let go of, in terms of I wanted to be able to put it out there, and it meant a lot to me. And I know first book that maybe I could have got to a point where I thought maybe I'll just shelve this, maybe it's not meant to be published. But I really felt like I wanted this one to be out in the world, and for people to read it, and hopefully people will connect with it. So yeah, if I hadn't found a publisher or an agent at some point, I would have certainly gone down the self-publishing route, and I was starting to like write down costs and stuff, and think about what that would look like, to try and pitch my husband.
What was his reaction when you started to kind of just open him up to the idea?
You know what? He's really supportive. I think he's happy that when I started writing, that I found something that kept me kind of quiet in the evenings and gave him more time on the PlayStation.
Mm.
So yeah, he's been really supportive, and I think he would have, I was mentioning to him if self-publishing potential cost, and he was like, yeah, as long as you know your budget and all this stuff, then and that's something you want to do, then go for it. And it ended up that I don't need to do that, but yeah, I'm really grateful for his support, because I think at times when you're a writer, it can be really tough and feel a bit lonely, and like when the rejections are rolling in, you're like, maybe I should just give up, because this is really tough. And rejections are difficult no matter who you are, because as much as I always tell people, don't take it personally, because absolutely not everyone is going to like your writing, and that's just fact. I still was taking it personally. I think that they've gotten easier now, but when you're kind of refreshing your email inbox over and over again, and you get you're like, oh, there's an email, and then it's a rejection. It's hard to bring yourself back up sometimes, and so his support has been really, really appreciated in getting me through this. Him and like other writers that I've met on Twitter who have been supportive as well. It's a really good community on there.
Yeah, it's surprised me the writing community on Twitter, and Twitter has its negative.
Of
There's
course.
pockets of negativity on Twitter, but the writing community is really supportive, and it seems like they really look out for each other. So it's
Mm,
a lot of authors have told me that they found so much support and help
mm,
on the in that community.
yeah.
And you also mentioned video games. How have video games inspired you?
Oh, I think they've been inspiring me since I first started playing. So I remember floppy disks, and I feel like I played Duke Nukem when I was like 8, which is highly inappropriate. But there we go, I was doing it. But the main like the first time I remember like falling in love with video games was Ocarina of Time.
Hmm.
When I think I was about 10. Um, and yeah, Legend of Zelda is a series that I just really enjoy. And it's I think it's quite a simple formula in terms of fantasy story. It's just the hero and the hero's journey. You're just following Link, like defeating the evil guy. So it's a story that it's a little bit kind of uh it's tried and tested, right? It's a fantasy story that we've seen multiple times. So for me, I definitely take the basis of um those kind of stories, Legend of Zelda, Final Fantasy. Like I grew up playing the Final Fantasy games, probably like numbers 8 through 12 were the times I was playing it. And now I play bigger games like I love Red Dead Redemption 2, God of War, Horizon Zero Dawn, and Forbidden West. Just on The Witcher 3 as well. So games where I think what those ones have in common, I'm not so drawn to the open world again. It is like how interesting is the main character. Like Red Dead Redemption 2 for me, like as much as yeah, it probably was a bit repetitive in places. The game was huge and like there was unnecessary bits, but the characters and the way they interacted with each other really drew me in and made me connect with that story. So I think that's where I've again taken the influence from video games is how the characters present and how their stories unfold. Um, yeah, because I have no doubt that you're seeing elements of all these different games that I've played in my storytelling because I don't think there's any way you can play these games like as a dedicated video gamer and someone I've been playing for like 20 plus years. um yeah, there's no way you can absorb stories like that and not kind of have them come out in your own writing. I think there's just on some level there's going to be like bits and pieces from all those games that are coming together in what I'm the stories that I'm telling.
If you had to pick one, what would be your favorite video game?
Oh, oh, okay. Okay, I'm veering between Majora's Mask and Red Dead Redemption 2.
Hmm.
I'm gonna say Majora's Mask just because that I think what I preferred about that over Ocarina of Time was the fact that that game is like telling multiple people's stories because you're having to collect all these masks. And to collect the masks, I think there's like 50 or 60, maybe. I might be it's been a while since I played it, so maybe there's less. But for each mask, there's like a story line that you have to go through and to collect it. So yeah, I love that game. That's what I've replayed it loads. Like it's one that I revisit kind of regularly because it's you just get to a point where it's like muscle memory. You're working through the dungeons. You're like, yeah, I don't need to look at a guide anymore, like I did when I was like 11. And it's just kind of like a nostalgic comfort thing at this point. Like I love the music. I love There's like just the sound effects, and just I think it brings back a lot of comforting childhood feelings. Whereas Red Dead Redemption 2 just kind of left me like broken and devastated.
Yeah, it's great when a game can give you those positive vibes, like the
Mm,
nostalgia and just the sound and the story and the characters.
mm,
You had mentioned your Dungeons and Dragons character being an inspiration, and that character being in your book. Do you
mhm.
still play Dungeons and Dragons?
I don't, sadly. Well, I was playing like up to the pandemic, and
Mm.
then we had lockdown. I think we did attempt to do like some virtual ones, but the group kind of just drifted apart after that, and it was difficult to like pin everyone down. Everyone was going through their own stuff during COVID, and I completely get that. Um, so it's something I really would love to go back to, especially now I've got my own child. I mean, he's only a baby right now, but when he gets older, I'd love to introduce him to that kind of stuff because it's a shame that I only came to it in like my late 20s. It's something that I think I would have really enjoyed playing when I was younger because it's just so it just opens up a part of your brain. I think you don't necessarily engage in other like
Mm.
storytelling mediums, and you're having to be creative as part of it and do acting, which was the bit I really hated. I was always really awkward. I was like, no, my character's mute. It's fine. But I did become more comfortable talking as it went on, and it helped that I was playing with people who like really were experienced in it because I felt a bit like I was fumbling around, like, oh, what dice am I rolling? I don't know. Um, so I would definitely say I'm a newbie to it still. I was playing for a few years, but there's so much to learn for Dungeons and Dragons, and yeah, I played like the basic, like, is it like a fighter? Like that's so predictable. That is the option I always choose in any game, like like Diablo or whatever. I'm like, yeah, barbarian, that's fine because you can just beat the heck out of people, and that is easy. So that was the character I chose, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. I would like I said, I would love to go back to D&D at some point. Um, it's just about finding that group, isn't it? And like finding people that you connect with and are able to meet up regularly.
Yeah, and COVID really changed everything, didn't it?
Mm,
Just everything.
mhm.
Yeah. Did you get a lot of writing done during that time period?
I did. I think I was okay. Where are we? COVID. So yeah, I wrote the second book in the Communes Curse series. Um, I think after, so probably got my contract by then. I was like, okay, I need to start working on this. Um, and I was working on that serial killer fantasy book that I mentioned earlier. So that's got a little bit to it, but I haven't looked at that in a little while. I started working on a joint fantasy project with my friend Cindy Van Wilder. Again, is something on the back burner. So I think COVID, I was working from home, doing my counselling, so it was like so much opportunity to write. And now I'm like, I had a baby last summer, and the writing capabilities have gone out the window. So I'm just looking back at the pandemic, like, oh, I really should have appreciated that time. Because as much as it was really crap and it was a horrible time, and so much like stress for people, and people's mental health took a dive during that time, myself included, because we're stuck in this tiny flat. um I think writing really gave me like a means of escape and of still being able to feel like I was doing something for me, even if I wasn't able to leave the house for extended periods of time. I was still escaping out into this other world. That may sound incredibly cheesy, but it just gives that kind of opportunity for people, and I think that was important probably for a lot of people who are writing through the pandemic, helping to give you something to focus on that wasn't COVID.
Yeah, I think that the escapism is really important, especially now because we're so inundated with politics or
Mhm,
whichever side anyone is on. There's always someone on the other side, and it's
mhm,
just such a toxic thing. So I think it's important to have those places you can go, whether it's places you create or that someone else created that you're visiting. So it's really important, I think.
yeah,
Oh,
I agree.
yeah, we'll go crazy. Do you have any? You mentioned tropes or the character tropes. Do you have any favorite fantasy tropes?
Yeah, I'd say probably I do like found family. I think there's something like quite comforting about that. Like that is a trope that is used in my book. I mean, it doesn't necessarily pan out how you would expect it to, but it's still one that, you know, the feedback I've got so far is like people like that relationship, and I think it's something that gives people something nice and fuzzy and warm to hold on to, even in if it doesn't work out. I also really like the bad guy, evil overlord, but again, I don't think you can have a bad guy who just does stuff because like he's just bad. Like I really don't enjoy stories where the bad guy is like that. It's just kind of a hollow shell, and is just, you know, killing a bunch of people for just because, just that's it. Like this is again one I've tried to look at in my book, and going back to that counseling theory. Okay, so why are the bad guys how they are? And kind of Commander Suleiman, who is one of those point of view characters, is to an extent he starts as a bad guy, but as the story goes on, hopefully you see part of his history and what he's been through, and start to understand why he believes what he believes. And the actual kind of antagonist, if you like, of this story, Lord Torrent, who Commander Suleiman works for. Again, I've used like attachment theory and counseling theory to try and give a little bit backstory and make his actions a bit more understandable, even if they're not like agreeable. And I think that's key to making like a good evil overlord, is having their backstory a little bit fleshed out and making them a bit sympathetic, even if you're like, okay, yeah, they just slaughtered like a whole village, but like their mum didn't love them, so you know, like it gives that tiny glimmer of a redeeming feature, I think. And I for me, I think that's what makes tropes enjoyable. Like you cannot avoid them; they're going to be in every story that you read. But how has the author put like a little twist on it and made it a little bit different and unexpected?
And what books do you enjoy reading?
Well, fantasy, unsurprisingly. So I am a bit of a mood reader. Sometimes I'll fancy like a real like diving into an epic fantasy, like a trilogy. You know, I've got like several Robin Hobb series on the go. But the thing is, I'll read like one book and they were like, I need a break now, so I'm going to go read like this crime thriller, or just like, I find that I can really read crime thrillers really quickly because they're just like, I don't know, a lot less complicated than epic fantasy stories tend to be. You know, there's less characters to remember and less stuff going on. It's just, you know, a serial killer being hunted down or whatever it is. And yeah, so I kind of tend to like have fantasy, crime thriller, and like balance it out like that. I have recently started reading multiple books at once because I don't know what's happened to my brain since I had a baby, but I've like really slowed down with my reading. So I'm like, okay, if I read two books at the same time, I mean, not literally, that would be a feat. Maybe I can read them quicker. What's actually happened is that I'm reading both books even slower. But, you know, it was a nice idea in principle, and it means that I can kind of know that I've got more to choose from. My to be read pile is huge. So if people could stop, you know, releasing really good sounding books, that would be great. I need to catch up. But yeah, fantasy is definitely number one genre, and has been like for as long as I can remember.
Yeah, there's too many books out there. It's hard to keep up.
It
There's
really is.
yeah, it's really tough. Do you have any any favorite books or any books that you've read that you've noticed things about their writing style or what they did in the writing that you thought, well, that's really clever. I should try and do
Mhm.
something like that you may not have noticed before when you before you
Mhm.
started getting serious about writing?
Yeah, I mean, I think once, I don't know if other people have found this once they've started writing, but I've found like I cannot turn my like editing eye or critical eye or whatever it is, or it's like admiring writing, like you say. I can't turn that part of my brain off. So I'll be like reading something like, oh, that's amazing. Like I really wish I could write like that. So definitely, and I'll keep mentioning her, but Robin Hobb is is to me, her writing style is just something I really aspire to, because she creates like not only three-dimensional characters who, like, sometimes you love to hate them, sometimes you're rooting for them from the beginning, but also the world building as well. And that's something that probably for me is something that I would like to be able to gain more skill in is world building. And I feel like, you know, my world is pretty well realized, but it's not as complicated as some of these that you see. Like Samantha Shannon's Priory of the Orange Tree is another one, which is like really big fantasy book. And I felt like the world building that was amazing. So yeah, I'm not necessarily someone that gets drawn to like overly lyrical or like descriptive writing. I veer away from an info dump. But it's when writers are able to weave that world building really seamlessly into the story as it's moving along. I think that's a skill that really needs honing as you write more, and undoubtedly that's something that I need to keep working on. Hopefully, as I write more books, it will become something that is just kind of second nature. I think perhaps when you first start start out in writing, you can feel a little bit awkward in like trying to describe something and trying to move the story at the same time. It's a bit of a skill you need to be able to mesh those two together.
Mm-hmm. And you've taken part in a few panels recently. What has that experience been like?
Yeah, nerve-wracking. That was my first so I did QuaranCon a few weeks ago, which is an online convention, and I'm doing Right Hive in June, which is again online. And I think actually you having the option to do my first conventions as online gives me a little bit of a like easing me into this the convention lifestyle kind of thing, because I'd love to take part in real life ones at some point. But I'm someone who is inherently anxious, really introverted. I've had social anxiety since I was young. So yeah, it gets to a point where I'm just like, what? I can't believe I'm doing this. Like if I told my teenage self what I was doing, I think I'd just kind of implode on the spot. Like it's yeah. It's really fun though. To be honest, once I started talking to people, like we did for QuaranCon, it was about love and other kind of relationships in SFF fiction. Once you start talking to people, and you know, you just kind of start bouncing off each other. It becomes a lot more natural, and the nerves tend to dissipate for me. So yeah, I think I'm always going to be nervous before I do anything like that at all. And that's just me. I don't think you can ever switch that off if you're just an anxious person. But hopefully I'll get more opportunities to do it and just feel like I can at least put a brave face on so I don't look nervous. Even if inside, you know, I'm like internally terrified. Yeah, but to be fair, I really enjoyed it. I really want to do more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of interesting panels. I've seen a few of them, and I watched the one that you did too. So it's really neat that we can do that kind of thing online now, and not have to leave the comfort of your own home, or like you said, just kind of ease your way into the whole experience. It's easier online, to instead of going in person.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple of questions I have left for you. The first one is, was there ever a hobby or a thing that you were excited to try, but when you tried it, you did not enjoy it?
Oh, okay. Let's have a think. I'm now realizing how uninteresting a person I am. Probably like painting and stuff, because in my head I can paint this amazing like landscape or portrait, and I'll have like an image, and I'm like, yeah, I can do that, and then it like gets put on paper, and I'm like, that is atrocious. What is that? That's not the image I have in my brain. So I very quickly kind of get annoyed with that and give up. Like I have paints that have not been touched in many years. It's probably something that I need to be just relax about and just enjoy the process of painting, you know. But for me, I just get frustrated that it's not turning out how I want it to. So it's just, I don't think I'm ever going to reach the skill that I would like to in my brain. So I just like, nah, I'm not going to bother.
And do you have a favorite family recipe?
Ooh, oh man, I'm a rubbish cook. You know that. I mean, probably being English, it's got to be like a roast dinner. And it's one of those things that like my husband has recently taken on the mantle because he's been practicing his roast potato recipe. So he's inherited that from his mum, which I'm taking as my family because we're
Yeah,
married.
of course.
And yeah, so to be honest, he's more the cook in the relationship, and I'm fine with that because that means I just get loads of roast potatoes and don't have to do any of the prep. So that works for me. And this just like a particular way of cooking the roast potatoes. You get a nice crispy outer layer and fluffy on the inside. I'm making myself hungry to talk about it.
And if the zombie apocalypse happened today, what would be your weapon of choice?
Oof. Oh boy. Is there an option to just like lock myself somewhere?
Yeah, you could do that too.
I always think I used to watch The Walking Dead, and I would just sit there thinking, if this happened, I'm just gonna go and hide somewhere and hope for the best because I'm not good with blood, so it would very quickly go downhill for me. If I had to pick a weapon, I feel like it would have to be something that just like close by, like a particularly heavy book might it would save someone's head in. Yeah, because I think I would just be useless if it happened. To be honest, I've seen enough of The Walking Dead to know I am not down for that.
Just grab the nearest Stephen King book and you're set to go.
I've got the stand. It's fine.
Get away from me. I have the stand. I'll use it. Uh, what was your first job?
It was a really boring office admin job. Um, yeah, I did those for like 10 years before I was like, this is soul destroying. I am going to train to be a counselor and do something actually worthwhile. Yeah, it was one of those like, if anyone watches The Office, it was like exactly like that. Like it was just like certain people in it, and it's just I'm sure there are offices that are really great to work in, but I worked in like a really depressing one. That at the time I was like, this is amazing. I'm earning like it was something like £800 a month, woohoo! And which is very little, but at the time I just left school, and that was amazing for me. So to be fair, I think it gave me a lot of experience. It gave me a lot of confidence. Like when I started, the idea of answering the phone to people from the outside was terrifying, but you have to do it. So it definitely, I got skills from those jobs that I think you can really help people like me out who have a lot of social anxiety, like, answering the phone, building up your confidence, talking to people and stuff like that. So it's not like it was all bad. It's just that I never, ever want to do it again.
It's great that we learn, like you say, we learn those lessons from those not so great experiences that we carry on and make us better.
Mm.
So something I like to ask every guest because I like to try and improve the questions and the format and everything. If the roles were reversed and you were in my position,
Mm-hmm.
was there a question that you would have asked that I did not ask?
If you could meet a character from a book, who would you choose?
Okay. Who would you choose?
Mm.
Who would you choose?
Who would I choose? I think I would choose. Um, oh boy, I've messed myself up with my own question. Probably like someone from Lord of the Rings. I'm gonna say Sam from Lord of the Rings because he he's one of my favorite characters. I think he just seems like just a good guy. He's loyal. He knows how to cook potatoes. So that's all I need.
There's quite a few people that think that Sam is the hero of Lord of the
Oh
Rings. That
yeah,
yeah.
I totally agree. Like Frodo would not have seen that through without him.
No, no, he wouldn't have gotten there without him. Cool. Well, I want to thank you for coming by today. I had a great time chatting with you. And if someone wants to connect with you, where's the best place to find out about Awakening or to connect with you on social media?
So Twitter is my main kind of social media place. So it's at Lucy A. McLaren. And my author website, which is a mouthful, is lucyamclarenauthor.wordpress.com. But to be honest, if you just add me on Twitter, there's a link on there for my website, and I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well. But main one is Twitter. So go there, and then you can find everything else. Yeah, and yeah, if you want to check out my book, I'd love to hear people's feedback. And it's my first book, and it means a lot to me if anyone just even reads it. Even if you don't enjoy it, even if you just read it, that means the world to me. But thank you very much for having me, Steve. It's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and the release date is May.
1st of May. Yeah, a week today.
Nice. So I'll leave all the links down below, and I'll leave all the Amazon links and all the place to connect with you. And it is available if someone watches this before May 1st. It is available for pre-order. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, like pretty much anywhere you can buy a book, you should be able to pre-order it. But obviously, big ones are like Bookshop, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all the big ones. There are pre-order links that actually all listed on my website. If you look on there, there's a tab that has all the pre-order links on it.
How exciting is that to have working on a book for so long and you're almost there? It's almost released, isn't that? It must be so exciting. I'm really happy
It really
for you.
is. It is exciting and terrifying in equal measure.
No, it's great to see that it's so close. It must be a little, like you said, a little nerve-wracking, but it's great. Yeah, I'm really happy for you. So
Yeah, thank you, Steve.
awesome. Well, thanks again for coming by, and I'll leave all the links, like I said, down below to connect with you and to order the book.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Thanks again.
Take care. Bye-bye.